Now in sending this data, what I want to do is I want to mimic exactly what we do in HTML when it sends data out of a form. This is the simplest way to get data out of a Flash movie file, and it just so happens that most of these forms that we're hooking up to are ones that will be set up to some kind of an HTML address as well. Now just to make sure we know what we're doing, let me take a quick look at a browser. You can either open a browser or just watch up on the screen because I just want to take a look at how data gets sent on a normal HTML page. I've pulled up the Google page here, and the Google front page actually has a form built into it right here that we're using to perform our searches. If I was searching for something like flowers, I would just type in what I wanted to search into their input text field, click on Google search, and of course it's going to come up with all kinds of results for flowers for me. What I want to pay attention to is how they sent the data. They actually attached the data right directly to the URL address, and this portion here is where the data is being sent. You can see my search term flower right in the middle there. They've actually sent a few different variables, one called HL, one called Q, and one called button G. But the syntax that I'm interested in is this. We're going to start with the URL at the beginning. We're going to use a question mark to separate the URL from the data. And if we want to send multiple data variables, we just use ampersands in between each one in order to set them apart from each other. We're going to use this exact same format to send our data out. Now, I don't have anything prepared for the gardening resource for us to send this data to, so we'll just simply send it off to the Total Training website just so you can see how the data is formatted and delivered. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to take all these variables and gang them up into the data form that we're going to need to use with our URL. I'll do that with the trace statement just so we can test it. I'll trace each one of the variables, but I also want to add to the string the question mark to start it out and the ampersands in between it. So I'll start off with a question mark in quotes, and I'll simply add on to it each one of the variables. Fname plus, and now I'll need an ampersand placed in between the variables. Using this technique, we can add all the variables together into one big long string, and we can dump this right into our URL when we're finished with it. We'll add lname for last name, plus an ampersand, email, plus one more ampersand, and finally we'll add in fave. Let's see what that's going to look like. I'll go ahead and fill this form out as a user, using tab to go down through the fields, put in some kind of email address, and my favorite flower I'll say is an orchid. We'll send that data off, and in the trace statement you can see that that's been formatted into one big long line, just like the data from the Google website, and I've got separations between the values in here. Now all we need to do is add that to a URL and send it off to a real website. We're going to do that using a global function. Let me put another line here in my code, and we'll find that by going right up to our global functions reference book here, and I'll find the function we're looking for in the browser network category. It's called getURL. I'll just use the double-click shortcut to add that to my line here, and you can see getURL, all I have to do is specify the URL. I have some optional parameters I can add to that, the window and the method, but we won't be needing those. I simply need the URL that we're going to send the data to. Now this is going to need to be a full address, so I'm going to put it in quotes, and I'm going to start it off with http:// and we'll send it off to the Total Training website, which is at www.totaltraining.com. Now normally you'd send this to a website that actually is receiving data, but we'll be able to see how this data looks by sending it off to any old website. Now I do need to add my data to it, so let's add in a variable that contains all this information. I'm going to finish off my website with a close quotes, and I'm going to add into it a new variable that we'll make up called datastring. And I'll simply convert this trace statement into an assignment for our datastring variable. I'll use my var keyword, we'll call it datastring, and I'll set it equal to this entire assignment. Once again, I need to get rid of the trailing parentheses left over from my trace statement. Let's give that a try. I'll add in my data. We'll click the send button, and this time you can see we were taken to the Total Training website and the data was added just like it was from the form on the Google page. Now, of course, the Total Training website doesn't know what to do with this data. You'll have to send it to an address that actually is expecting data, but at least we can see how easy that is to set up.